All right, perfect. And thanks, Holger, for stepping in.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Janis Graubins, and I'm head of business development of cybersecurity at Key, and we work in the field of identity and access management. We are a quite young company for 2 years. However, we have been one of 7 companies from Latvia who have ever received Horizon 2020 grant. And as well as we have signed some big clients such as UBS and Credit Suisse in Switzerland. So it's actually my talk will be much from the perspective of telecommunications and banking field, how we solve these identity issues which are arising. To start with, I will basically concentrate on 3 things. So I will talk about what's the business challenges with identity at the moment, what are the regulation challenges, and how actually we can solve that. So we all know that currently we live in a digital environment. If previously people were just going to an office and buying the services, so now the customers want to have access to the service immediately from anywhere. And for companies, it is important because their lifespan is also changing. If some years ago, like top fortune companies, life cycle was very long, nowadays the environment is so fast that you have to adapt the newest tools in order to stay in the business. And what the problem is, there was a paper last year from World Economic Forum that despite that there are many initiatives working on digital identity, there isn't one which kind of puts that together and allows to use it, which is convenient for the user and which is based on the same standards, so you can share them with other companies. And in particular, if we look from the business side, the biggest problem is this, how you first identify the user, how you check the identity of that. And in such a case as banking or telecommunication, acquiring the user typically is very, very expensive. So it costs approximately 300 euros. And what we have seen from our clients that actually 50% of them are bounced or they stops the onboarding procedure because the identification is so complex that they have to go to a branch or that there's other means. So one way how it is solved is using video identification. And I know that as we speak in Latvia, there's even a new law put in place by the FKTK, which is regulator for financial companies, which will allow video identification. So that could, in part, solve this problem. However, still that's not enough because we have seen that it increases the usage of services by 40%. So you can solve it a little bit, but not completely. And that's why a lot of people maybe don't switch to banks or telecommunication companies which make more sense, or why government service where you as well need to be sure of the identity, the engagement rate is very low. So what is the next? And before I answer that, I will just talk a little bit what's happening actually from the regulation point of view. So there are 3 regulations which are changing in Europe. So one is called PSD2. And what it basically says, so on one side it says that you as person can easily share your transaction history with another bank and initiate payments from one place. However, what the problem there is that with the payment initiations, there's a question about this liability. Who's responsible in the end if something goes wrong, because you are not completely sure what identity process the other bank used for identifying the users or what authentication method used. So basically that means that you should have audit for this authentication and identification software. Another regulation is called eIDAS. In a part, it solves this because it is based on the digital signatures, and it says that digital signatures should be recognized across all member states, and everybody, if there's a digital signature used, then the company should adopt it for their services. So we see that in Latvia, for instance, there are a few banks who are using currently digital signatures from a smart ID card in order to access the bank services. However, again, there's this problem that it's not very convenient for the users. So what we have seen in Switzerland and Latvia, it's only approximately 10% of the people who are using that. So it's very, very low adoption rate. So the question is how to make it convenient for the user, because the solution itself, it's very, very good. And the third regulation which is happening in Europe is called GDPR. So it's all about minimizing data, putting person in control, that every time you want to get some information, you should ask for the consent of the user. It should be portable. So these are all big words, but then the question is how you can actually do that. And what we did, in Switzerland, we worked with 2 banks and 1 telecommunication company called Swisscom, and the banks were UBS, Credit Suisse. And we built a joint eID, which basically means that the identification information from the banks or telecommunication companies can be reused for third parties in a very convenient way. So instead of like having this identification process from scratch, where you go to a bank's branch and are identified or use video identification, you simply authenticate on another service. And it looks approximately like this. So for instance, there's a case like where you need to check the age of a person. You go to that service, you provide your identification number, and then on the mobile phone, you receive a notification where you can see what identity information is asked. And here, it's not only like one service is providing information, but it can be multiple. I will talk about that later, how you can link these identity attributes together so that are more convenient for the users, as well as that it allows to do this editing and pushing to all the partners from one place. Challenges, what we solved there, so there were like 3 things what we needed to do. So one was about how like one bank can trust another bank's identification. Another one, how they will get paid for these identity attributes what are shared. And the third question was about who will own this solution. And for solving this, how to trust another identification, we provided companies with few tools. So starting with identification, we provided them with video identification tool, which they can use in order to onboard the users. It currently is in the certification process from the regulators. Plus, it also works together with trust service provider, who after the identification gives a certificate that they vouch that this identification process has been correct, so that you actually don't have to rely on the company who are doing the identification process afterwards. You want to reuse it, but you can trust the trust service provider who is vouching for that. Another tool which we provided for them to make all this happen is authentication and authorization. So as simple as using it for employees to log in on critical infrastructure, you could also use it for the customers. So in this case, we actually provided them with risk-based authentication, which in the most easiest thing, you need just to provide a digital signature, pressing approve or deny. But in more risk-based situations, there's like step-up authentication where you need to use biometrics, or that you or the manager of yours approves that you can access the persons. In the case of customers, let's say an accountant is approving that certain amount of the money needs to be transferred, and then the CEO of the company reapproves that it actually can be done. We provide this solution as compliant with the PSD2. So the way how it solves that, it is independent factor from something you know and biometrics. And what has been the problem typically with other software solutions, that it's first of all not possible to see what the device health if you use a mobile phone. So you don't know if the device is rooted, if there are some other problems. And as it uses shared secrets and they are not protected, it's very easily to actually hack them. So we did just a little experiment where some of the software solutions we were able to hack in 2 minutes. So what we do differently is, first of all, we use public key cryptography, and we protect the key, the private key, with mobile phones hardware, so it's not possible to easily extract it. And second of all, we use something called risk-based authentication. So we look what the device health, if it's jailbroken or not, from where the person is trying to log in or approve a transaction, or what is the network status, and then ask for these multiple factors which can be used in order to approve. And the third thing, before this KYC, what we provided is document signature. It is in process to be compliant with the eIDAS regulation, so it provides qualified electronic signatures. And all these three things together, so they are like foundation for something what we call this KYC exchange, where you can be sure that the identity information is done by a trusted party, and then that the authentication procedure, which you will use later on for use this identity, is also compliant with all these rules, and it is based on the digital signatures which are made in the Europe for this purpose that it has this cross-boundary applications. And talking about this KYC exchange, how it works in particular. So let's say I'm a user of one bank. What I would like to do is I would like to link different identity attributes from different providers. So let's say from another bank, from a telecommunication company, from a smart card. I go to this application, I start this enabling, and I authenticate with the means what that company is using. Either it's a smart card, it's a hardware token, if they are using our solution. What we do then, we push this proof into blockchain, and this also allows to look up that the person has verified with their authentication means as the company, that they later on will use our solution for authenticating and sharing this identity. And for person, that looks as this, that you can see all these identity attributes in one place. You can see from where it is, what was the means, how it was put there, and you can actually edit them or delete them, and then it is pushed to all the partners who are participating in this scheme. So from the GDPR point of view, it's also helping to solve a lot of problems what are with this revocation and data forgetting. And the way how it works, if you want to use it, is that let's say, for instance, I'm an employee in one company. I would like to share to the state revenue service, or tax. I want to fill my tax declaration. So I again provide my identity information. From that, the state revenue service is able to determine that I'm working for this company, and they are asking me for this certain information, which in this case could come from a bank called UBS. So they're asking what's the company name, what are the revenue in order to calculate that, and even like for some banks processed information such as credit rating in some case. Then it is, after my approval, it's pushed towards the manager of the company who needs to approve that. So he looks if I can do that or not. And when it is done, it is finally sent to the bank for this identity attribute, which is co-processed by the bank in order to approve that they actually want to share this. Another use case where it can be used in the context of the GDPR would be, for instance, there is this point where information about children from 13 to 15 years old can be only collected if their parents approve that. So it would work the same. The child initiates that, and then it's pushed towards the parent, and then they decide that, okay, we allow that this information about a child is pushed towards the service provider. And just going back, how we are solving these problems about who's getting paid and who's owning this system, is that these identity attributes can be got back using smart contracts. So whenever a company is asking, needs certain identity attributes, they can pay with blockchain, and then these identity attributes are released. Plus, also our solution, it is not owned by anybody. We built it as a protocol, so it means that actually anybody can join or anybody can leave. So that solves problems that there's one solution which is owned by one company, so the other partners don't want to use it. Yes, to sum up, so this is how we are solving these very tough regulations in Europe. It solves a part of that. It definitely doesn't solve everything. But if you're interested in trying out and seeing how it can solve problems for you, I'm happy to talk. Thank you.
Super. Educative for me. Any questions from anybody? No? Well, Janis, thank you very much, sir.